Muy buenas tardes, tengan todos ustedes. Bienvenidos al segundo encuentro del ciclo Volver para ser otros, líderes repensando el futuro. Les voy a pedir entonces que tengan en cuenta algunos aspectos técnicos para el día de hoy. Como siempre, mantener el micrófono cerrado. Y hoy se agrega una variante adicional, que es el tema de la traducción simultánea. Nuestro invitado especial, Hoffman, que en unos minutos más presentaremos, su presentación será en inglés, y ustedes tienen las opciones de la interpretación. Los que están ahora en este momento escuchándome es porque están en el canal en español, y si quieren escuchar la conferencia en el canal en español, no tienen que hacer nada. Tienen que simplemente quedarse en el canal donde están. Por el contrario, si quieren escuchar la conferencia en inglés, lo que tienen que hacer entonces es ir a la interpretación y moverse al canal en inglés. Repito una vez más, si me están escuchando en español y quieren escuchar la conferencia en español bajo la traducción simultánea, no tienen que hacer nada. Tienen que quedarse donde están y cómo están y solamente moverse al canal en inglés aquellos que estén interesados en escuchar la conferencia en inglés o prefieran escucharla en inglés. Dicho esto, una vez más, bienvenidos. Y les vamos a pedir que, como siempre, usen el chat primero para contarnos el nombre y de qué ciudad o de qué país están. Así podemos saber con quiénes contamos hoy presentes entre nosotros. Todos ustedes saben que este es un programa conjunto organizado por la Universidad Hebraica de México, conjuntamente con la Fundación Bamá de Argentina. Y casualmente nuestro invitado especial de hoy, Hoffman, tiene ni más ni menos, o ha tenido ni más ni menos que la responsabilidad de crear Bamá en su momento, cuando todavía ni siquiera existía. Así que es una situación muy singular contar con su presencia hoy entre nosotros. Para dar inicio a este programa, vamos a pedirle unas breves palabras a Tzvika Miller, quien es justamente representante de la Agencia Judía para el Cono Sur, que por favor, Tzvika, manteniéndose en el canal en español, hablar en español. Hoffman está recibiendo también la traducción simultánea en inglés mientras estamos hablando. Él recibe la traducción en inglés, así que no hace falta hablar más que en español y él va a recibir directamente la comunicación. Tzvika, por favor.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Estoy emocionado especialmente dentro de este encuentro. Muchas gracias Dani, muchas gracias Jimena, muchas gracias Enrique de Bamá, de tener el orgullo de recibir a Hoffman, y es muy especial y muy personal esta vez. Yo llegando hace 1 año y medio casi a Israel, no lo dejé tranquilo hasta que nos sentamos a un buen cafecito en Jerusalén. Un buen cafecito. El cafecito era chico, pero tomamos 2 y durante 3 horas tuve la suerte de que él me explicó mucho sobre lo que es la solidaridad, lo que es juntar al pueblo judío entre Israel y la diáspora, la época especial en la que él vivió apoyando a Bamá y inaugurando a Bamá en el 2000-2001, y esa época difícil. Y por supuesto me dijo, seguramente la sociedad donde vas, Argentina y Sudamérica, más o menos está bien, pero tenedlo en cuenta que pueden ser épocas un poco difíciles. Lo que no me preparaste, Ellen, es cómo se hace una combinación de apoyo en una época de pandemia y cómo somos líderes en estas épocas y cómo nos transformamos. Así que sabiendo que vas a estar con nosotros hoy, para mí es muy, muy impresionante, muy emocionante y muy justo que nos acompañes hoy. Así que ya te doy tus palabras y muchas gracias por estar con nosotros hoy.
Muchas gracias, Tzvika. Bienvenidos a todos los que están desde Buenos Aires. Veo algunos viejos conocidos acá de la Ciudad de México. Hola, Janet, tanto tiempo sin vernos. Nos acompaña Dani también desde la Ciudad de México y me voy a pasar mucho tiempo. Gracias, Sergio, desde Buenos Aires, que va a ser nuestro segundo invitado a fin de mes en estas conversaciones. Gracias por acompañarnos. Y Dani, que fue el primero. Se ve que Hoffman concita la atención de los primeros y los últimos. Así que bienvenido a ambos. y Gustavo desde la ciudad de Buenos Aires, de Asunción de Paraguay, de Yucatán desde la ciudad de México, de San Pablo, Brasil. Bienvenidos, bienvenidos todos. Es un placer poder estar unidos de esta manera una vez más en una temática tan trascendente. Para iniciar el programa, la semana pasada tuvimos la presentación del doctor Daniel Feinstein, decano de la Universidad Hebraica, de Estudios Judaicos de la Universidad Hebraica, y le voy a pedir a Luis Karf, que somos conjuntamente los corresponsables de coordinar este programa, que si nos puedes hacer una breve reseña de los temas centrales y luego entramos directamente a Alan.
Muy bien. Voy a
Luis, ¿no se te escucha? Obstáculos tecnológicos que suelen ocurrir en este. A ver ahora, Luis, porque no se te escuchó. Okay. Vamos entonces, Jimena, por favor, si bloqueamos eso entonces por el momento, hasta que veamos si logra la conectividad, ¿no? Ahí estamos, Luis. ¿Estás escuchando ahora, Luis?
Sí, sí, perfecto. Se ve que tenemos algún nivel de dificultad con Internet.
Qué originalidad. Adelante, Luis, te escuchamos.
Sí, semana pasada voy a hacerlo bastante sintético por las dudas que nuevamente tengamos una interferencia o interrupción de Internet. La semana pasada estuvimos trabajando básicamente en los conceptos de liderazgo, y el liderazgo no como héroes aislados, sino como aquellas personas que crearon capacidades de liderazgo para generar transformaciones. Y en este generar transformaciones vimos también y caracterizamos la situación hoy día, y la caracterizamos no como un accidente histórico, sino como una situación de crisis, dado que en el accidente histórico los desafíos técnicos e inclusive adaptativos más o menos conocemos cómo resolverlos. En las crisis, el manual le faltan algunas páginas. Por lo tanto, está por parte de quienes ejercen el liderazgo o crean las capacidades de liderazgo, construir estas respuestas adaptativas a las realidades. Y ahí seguimos a una concepción de un autor llamado Heifetz, que Dani Feinstein trajo, a cual ambos conocemos, y nos parecía bastante útil como un enfoque para pensar esto. Lo importante fue recuperar 3 momentos históricos del pueblo judío, en la cual uno puede entender de qué manera estos líderes en estos momentos históricos supieron leer la situación contextual o supieron leer los escenarios, pudieron incorporar a sus gente, a labores, cómo y de qué manera co-crear una respuesta adaptativa y original para las épocas. Y también vimos cómo estos líderes y las capacidades que fueron creando tuvieron que navegar en dilemas. Pero mucho de su liderazgo estuvo sostenido sobre sus valores y sobre el propósito que tenía su accionar, que era más que un propósito de sostener una autoestima, era un propósito que tenía que ver con una intencionalidad y que tenía que ver con el sostenimiento de la vida judía y su expresión en los diferentes momentos históricos. Esto, en breve síntesis, es lo que conversamos y vimos y reflexionamos. Dado que este es un ciclo para la reflexión, reflexionamos alrededor de exactamente estos conceptos.
Muy bien, muchas gracias Luis. Y entonces vamos a entrar directamente en el tema del invitado especial que tenemos hoy acá con nosotros, el doctor Alan Hoffman, para los que no lo han conocido. Y perdón, antes de seguir, los que están en versión en español, por favor no se cambien. Los que quieren pasar a la versión en inglés van a escuchar la traducción simultánea. El doctor Alan Hoffman ha sido CEO de la Agencia Judía para Israel durante muchos años y donde tuvo la responsabilidad de encarar procesos de transformación sustantivos dentro de la Agencia Judía, entre ellos algunos de los cambios que generó en el transcurso de largos años de trabajo fue justamente la creación de la Fundación Bama, quien es hoy coorganizadora del programa. A su vez, fue director del Centro Melton para la Educación Judía en la Universidad Hebrea de Jerusalén y también fue CEO del Council Initiative of Jewish Education en New York, para decirlo en forma breve, y cursó estudios de posgrados en la Universidad de Harvard. La mecánica de la reunión de hoy es básicamente arrancar por preguntas que tenemos para hacerle a Alan y les pedimos a los participantes en el chat que quieran sumar preguntas a las preguntas que ya tenemos, que vayan escribiéndolas y de esa manera iremos contestándolas. Bien. Alan, bienvenido. La primera pregunta está vinculada al campo de la educación en Israel, tema que tú conoces muy bien y tienes una larga trayectoria en ese tema, y tiene que ver con las consecuencias de la pandemia. ¿Cuáles han sido las consecuencias de la pandemia en la educación en Israel? Si la educación en Israel frente a la pandemia es más de lo mismo, pero virtual, o ha generado algún tipo de proceso de cambio. Y particularmente nos preocupa entender mejor cuáles son los dilemas que enfrentan los líderes en el campo de la educación, ya sea en la función pública, ya sea como directores de escuela. ¿Cuáles son los principales dilemas a los que están enfrentándose los líderes en la toma de decisiones?
Okay, so let me first say that I'm delighted to be here tonight. For me, it's tonight. For you, it's today. It's already close to my bedtime. It is true that I was involved in the creation of Bama. But it's also true, I'm not sure that so many people here know, that when I first came to the Hebrew University, Moshe Davis, the late Professor Moshe Davis, was involved in creating the Hebraica University in Mexico. And in the 1980s, I think that I was one of the first people who actually visited the Hebraica when it first began. I'm delighted to see Danny here. I'm delighted to see Zvika here. I'm delighted to see Danny Yoffe and Luis, who I met the first time I came to Argentina as Alberto Sendere's guest. I'm delighted to see Rabino Sergio here, who we have become close friends over the years, and I hope to see more in Jerusalem in the years to come as soon as the planes start flying. Okay, and I have never met Jimena, but I've already met her virtually, and I look forward to meeting you in the future. Let me just say a few things about the pandemic. You know, today is actually an important day because the government of Israel, there was just on the television 2 hours ago, a interview with the Prime Minister of Israel and with our new Minister of Health, who himself is a Jerusalem fellow, just like Sergio Bergman and Danny Feinstein, where basically the government of Israel is actually threatening to walk back, to retreat on the position that it's taken with regard to COVID and education. I think you know that in the last 24 hours or 48 hours, the number of new cases in Israel of COVID have passed the number of 200 each of those days, whereas it went down to 20 cases only 10 days ago and 2 weeks ago. The majority of all new cases have come from the education system. So Israel was one of the pioneers in the world to actually open up the education system very, very quickly. First of all, the Ganei Yeladim went back to school, then the first few grades, Kita Aleph, Bet, Gimel, then the middle schools, and then the high schools. But last week, Gimnasia Rechavia, which is not a Haredi school in Jerusalem, it is the quintessential secular school in Israel, located right in the heart of Rechavia, 50 yards away from the main building of the Jewish Agency. Gimnasia Rechavia came down within one day with 170 cases of COVID in that school. But because of the intimacy of Israeli society and of Jerusalem society, the teacher who was the super spreader of COVID at Gimnasia Rechavia also was the math teacher at the Hoffman school. So within one day, the Hoffman school, a modern Orthodox school, closed down, and all the little brothers and sisters of the Gimnasia Rechavia and the Hoffman school in about 11 primary schools in Israel, within 3 or 4 days, the Vadei Orim, the parents' committee of those committees, basically decided to close the schools. And I believe that Israel is now in a major reevaluation of the policy of opening up the education system. Because, number one, in our education system, particularly in the high schools, but also in the Chativat Beinaim, the middle schools, in the Israel public school system, you have many, many schools with close to 35 students in a class. And there is a belief today that it is impossible to separate the students in the way that needs to be done in order to be able to have social distancing in order to go. The basic model that I believe the Israeli schools are going to be moving towards is what is called capsulot. So you divide a class into a capsula, a capsule of half the number of students, 18, 15, 14, 12 if you're lucky. They come to school. If the school has many facilities, you use the teachers' offices, you use the gymnasium, you use the school to be able to separate the capsulot. Tonight on the television, they're actually talking about creating a perspex barrier in the Israeli classrooms. So that, Danny, in answer to your first question, I want to say that Israel moved very aggressively and very fast to open the school system. Why? Because the economy is completely dependent on kids being able to go to school, particularly in the lower grades. If the children do go to school, the mothers cannot go to school. And today, in families that are much more equal, not only the mothers, but also the fathers cannot go to work. And if you want to reignite the economy and you want to bring down the rate of people who are out of work from 25%, which Israel had at its highest, and you want to do that quickly, you have to be able to send people to school. As you know, we are an incredibly centralized school system. It's all run from the center by Misrad HaChinuch. That is great, but it also is sometimes problematic. So that I think that that the attempt to totally open the school system and do it before the school year ends. Remember, in New York, they will not open schools. In London and most of Britain, they will not open schools. I think in France, they will not open schools until September, if at all. Israel decided to open the schools, and the arms of the teachers' union were twisted in order to be able to get the teachers' union to agree to continue to teach during the month of July. I want to say, Danny, because I see there are some questions as well. What I do want to say is, and I think that this is in a way one of the major themes of what I wanted to talk about today. I think the pandemic, COVID, has only accelerated major processes that were already happening in society and in education. And I think we see that not only in education, we see that in many arenas. For example, the issue of e-commerce. The shopping centers in Israel, big article in today's paper. Shopping centers, ala panim. Shopping centers all over the world are having a terrible time. But they were having a terrible time before. Amazon and the virtual world had essentially begun to create a process that was leading to a major change process. I believe that similarly, education in the world today is under assault. The school as we know it today is in a very serious crisis. And I would say, Danny, would you like me to say something about that? Or would you like me to take a question?
No, me gustaría que amplíes esto que estás diciendo, porque este fenómeno de acelerar procesos, creo que suena interesante profundizar un poco más.
So let me say about education. You know, I could talk about many processes that COVID has accelerated. Also interpersonal processes, the relationships between spouses and many other things that everybody on this call, I think, knows a lot about. However, I think that we all know that the traditional model of the school, of a teacher who stands in the front of a class and whose job is to impart knowledge from a full vessel to an empty vessel, that model that basically comes from the 19th century and existed for a large part of the 20th century, with people like Dewey and others challenging it. Essentially, that model is bankrupt. The fact that our children, Generation Z, X, Y, and now Z, have this little thing in their palms that I'm holding in their palm, and that a child can, and certainly a young adult, but even a child, has access, total access to knowledge, and also is a master of technology in the way that the teacher is often not. has actually changed the nature of the educational process very, very deeply already over the last 15 to 20 years. And I think that what COVID did was it forced the schools of the world, and because Israel is an early adapter, and because I think we have a high level of technology, and because we're a young society, and because we have many young teachers who themselves are technologically literate, I think Israel was relatively able, easily, to move to the distance learning mode very, very quickly. But I have watched quite carefully over this period to see how classes have adapted and classes have not adapted. It's an incredibly difficult thing to actually take your syllabus, your curriculum, your materials, and to move from one day to the next, to be able to have children sitting at home like we are. It's a very tiring experience that we are having today. Can you imagine children who are sitting opposite these screens? And what does it take when the child is actually more technologically literate than the teacher to be able to impart interest, because the knowledge is actually there already. It's accessible through the technology. And I think that this is the big dilemma that education is going to face. And I think that COVID is basically raising a question. What is going to be the future of the school? And I think that that all the other sides of the school that I'll talk about later this evening if we have time, which is the informal part, the socialization, the kind of role of the peer culture, the role of psychological growth by interaction, what happens in the playground, what happens in the interaction between children. That has taken a back seat to parents. The other part of what has happened is that suddenly the parents who for many, many years were used in Israel to put their children on the bus and send them off to school. Many of my colleagues in the university who are themselves teaching classes said to me, I now find that I'm teaching online, but I'm also homeschooling my kids. I have to sit at home and I get assignments from the teachers. I'm beginning to understand a little bit more of what the school is trying to expect from the children. And I'm actually quite concerned about what my child is getting and what my child is not getting. And I think that this paradigm, the paradigm of the lack of involvement of the parent, deep involvement of the parent in the content, has been shattered in many cases. The final thing I want to talk about, and then I'm going to shut up, if there's some questions. And that is that in Israel, very clearly, this need to move from frontal teaching in the classroom, which is essentially quasi-democratic, to a mode of education in which the families who are haves, are so much more blessed than the families of the have-nots. Just imagine a Bedouin child in Rahat who may walk to school for an hour, but then he or she sits in a classroom like any other child in Israel. That child in Rahat may live in a house without a computer. And if they live in a house with one computer, there's certainly not a computer that's accessible to every child. And if there's a computer in the house, clearly the mother is probably ill-equipped to help the student in dealing with it. So suddenly you have a huge debate about the role of technology in perpetuating the gap between the haves and the have-nots in education.
Alan, mientras le hacemos una nueva pregunta a Alan, si alguien quiere en el chat enviar algún tipo de pregunta, este es el momento justo para hacerlo, como para que entonces le pasemos las inquietudes que ustedes tengan a Alan. Ahora bien, Alan, siempre hemos visto a Israel como una sociedad avanzada y como una sociedad que ha logrado enormes éxitos tanto en lo tecnológico, en la salud, y visto de esta manera estos inicios aparentemente fallidos de clases y estos aceleradores de procesos que ya estaban, como tú bien decías anteriormente, simplemente aceleran ya procesos que ya estaban en marcha. ¿Te imaginas o se imaginan ya en Israel? ¿Hay reflexión en torno a cuál va a ser la nueva escuela? ¿Hay alguna nueva escuela que se está pensando para el futuro o es muy temprano todavía?
I think, Danny, it's a very good question. And I think on the one hand, it's early, but on the other hand, I think I should mention, because maybe not everybody here knows, that the Rothschild Foundation, a long time ago, created a very important institution in Israel called the Center for Educational Technology, MATACH, Merkaz Chinuch Technology, or Technologia B'Chinuch. And there is no doubt that Matach has got a bank of content that became available in a mass way for the Israeli educational system. But the technological transfer that has happened between Shmona Matayim, the Israeli defense establishment, and the high-tech unit in the army, with the Israeli high-tech technology industry, both in cyber and in biotech, there and in medical technology, and in the development of instrumentation in medicine. Those areas in which Israel is a world leader, laser, the vision, night vision, there has not been the same kind of interconnection between the high-tech world of Israel and the educational world of Israel. And I think it's happened a little bit, but I think that you have a new, if you read the papers, you have a new set of interest. Remember that the high-tech entrepreneurs in Israel are 35, 45 years old. They have young children in the school system. And these parents who went off to Herzliya Pituach and to the other places like that, to their chamamot, to their incubators of high-tech, they've been spending 2.5 months at home with their children. They have been watching how their children learn and how they don't learn. And I expect that in the next few months and years, we are going to see a big blossoming of cross-pollination and cross-fertilization between the traditional high-tech industries in Israel and the educational tech. I should say, I myself am actually participating this semester. I decided to take 3 classes. One is a class at the Rubin Music Academy with 90 students. One is a class at the Rubin Academy with 6 students in a seminar. And one is another seminar with 12 students. 3 different teachers, each of them thrown onto their own devices. They basically were told from one day to the next. One of them, a young man who is a real tech enthusiast, has basically reconceptualized his classroom. And I actually think that His lessons are much, much more stimulating, interesting, and deliberative than they were frontally. The frontal class, where a very talented lecturer would lecture to a class on the history of Baroque music. Too many people here on the screen for me to tell the truth. Probably one of you knows the teacher. So I should just say it's much, much, much less effective than it was in person. And on the other, I see how the teacher is struggling. She has some very good ideas. She begins the class with a really well-structured, but the technology kind of falls apart. And it makes me wonder how one needs to provide support if the traditional teachers are going to have to become used to dealing with new technology. They're going to have to need a lot of training and a lot of support and a lot of existence proofs. The Talmud talks about asmachta. You need an existence proof to be able to show these teachers that didn't get the example of what this will look like.
Bien. Alan, estamos en el final, como siempre ocurre, llegamos al final. Y tengo una pregunta que me solicitaron y también luego le dejo a Luis para un comentario reflexivo para tus reacciones. Pero la pregunta es, la audiencia que nos acompaña hoy son todos líderes que conducen procesos, sistemas, instituciones educativas en sus distintos roles, tantos roles como de dirección general, de unidades, de áreas, o inclusive dirigentes de estas organizaciones. Y estamos entre México y Sudamérica y Argentina en América Latina. Y cuando miramos Europa, Israel, vemos como aquello pareciera ser hacia dónde estamos marchando. ¿Qué priorizar? Pensando en términos de los líderes que tenemos hoy acá y lo que nos viene por delante, donde todavía estamos en la era de la cuarentena y se viene aparentemente en las próximas semanas algún proceso de transición, donde ya los sistemas públicos hablan de la apertura de los ciclos escolares. ¿Qué focalizar? ¿En dónde poner el acento? ¿En dónde los líderes deberían pensar antes y después, en términos de lo que falta para, y después el day after, lo que viene luego, en qué debería centrarse la visión o el foco de atención de un líder en este tipo de circunstancia? Luis, ¿tienes algún comentario que querías hacer? Micrófono. Adelante, Luis. Sí, adelante.
Sigo tu misma línea de pensamiento y me gustaría, Alan, que podamos ampliar un poquito e integrar algunas cosas que dijiste. Vos presentaste algunos desafíos que hoy la educación está presenciando. Especialmente el impacto tecnológico, lo cual trae la transformación tanto del rol del docente, la currícula y la institución educativa, ya sea superior o escolar. El tema sería, ¿por qué no debatimos un poquito a qué o cómo pensás vos lo que sería el espacio educativo, donde no se desarrolla solamente en un lugar espacial, sino justamente que tanto la tecnología como esta pandemia nos ha llevado a integrar un hábitat que va más allá del espacio, el hábitat, por ejemplo, de las casas personales de cada uno, lo cual ha impactado también en los roles tanto de paternales, roles paternos, dado que han tenido que tener un activo rol en el proceso educativo. Entonces, ¿cómo estás viendo este fenómeno posterior a esto? Porque no es que los padres van a abandonar un rol porque permiten nuevamente volver a la gente a los establecimientos escolares, sino que el establecimiento escolar se transformó y hemos transformado el espacio educativo. Entonces, me gustaría que pudieras debatir un poquito, podríamos reflexionar sobre a qué vamos a llamar la educación más allá de las instituciones educativas.
So I would like to, I'm looking at the clock, so, and I'd like to respond also to the question of leadership and both to the fascinating question that Louis asked. I want to say that I believe that after this pandemic, and I think it's beginning in Israel already, I think there is going to be a big debate about education. I think education is going to return to a major worldwide debate, because I think that these young parents who are, the future leadership of the world, they are themselves millennials. Generation X and Generation Y, the parents, are going to have a lot to say about what they saw. That's number one. Number two, I think that, I said it before, I think the notion of the family unit as an educational unit, something happened here, but that may be true about the haves. Remember, in Israel, we are a society where we have many, many have-nots. Most of you are dealing with middle class plus Jews who are part of the have generation. But the world is going to have to think about, what did this pandemic teach us about what happened to education with the have-nots as well? And I think there's going to be a big debate about that as well. Number three, and that I touched tangentially before, but I want to emphasize it. I come from the world of informal education. I grew up in the youth movement. I worked in Israel programs. I did spend part of my life thinking about schools, but the most part of my career, I thought about the role of institutions that engage young people with each other in something called peer leadership, and the power of the group, the power of the community of peers. And one of the things that this pandemic has done is to, the metaphor of this pandemic is social distancing. Israel, what makes Israel unique is social intimacy. Suddenly, we are dealing with distancing. Some of the countries that have dealt with this pandemic so much better, places like Singapore or Korea, these are countries, even Japan, these are countries where distancing is a big part of the social fabric. And I think that one of the things we have to consider is, what have we learned about the lives of children over these 3 months in terms of what have they been missing in terms of all of those components of play, all the things that Dewey talked about, all the things of discovery that technology cannot replace. One of the magnificent things about Shabbat is that tomorrow afternoon, I take this thing and I switch it off for 24 hours. And, what have we learned from the overabundance of technology in this period? So I think there's a lot of conclusions to be made about leaders. In Israel, and I'm cognizant of the clock, in Israel, I think there was a big struggle about education. Should education policy be decided by politicians and by the health policy people, or by the educational policy people? I think one of the great things we are fortunate about is we have a Director General, a non-political Director General of our Minister of Education, who he's come back to be Director General of the ministry. So that even though politicians were the ministers of education, I think that the professional cadre of the leadership of Misrad HaChinuch was able to function pretty well. But one of the things that we learned, I think, is that the schools in which the principals and the Vad Horim, the parents' committees, worked closely together in creating what they thought should be the learning environment that reflects the mission of the school, those institutions functioned best. And institutions that did not have that often fell apart. I also want to talk about, in the closing minutes here, I want to talk about the risk-averse and the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And I take these terms from my friend, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, when he talked about the Parsha, the portion of the Bible that we are going to read this coming Shabbat, Shlach. And we talk about the spies. And you remember 12 spies went out, Latur et haaretz, to visit the land. 10 came back and said, things are terrible. We can't do anything. They were princes. They were leaders. They were in charge of the tribes. And only Yoshua and Caleb ben Yefuneh, came back and said, it is a great country. And they said, because we were in our own eyes as grasshoppers, so we seemed in their eyes. And Jonathan Sachs, years and years and years ago, taught me that what's the difference between those 10 leaders and the 2 leaders who said, what a wonderful country and what potential it has. The first 10 leaders who were in their own eyes like grasshoppers, they were risk averse. They said, this crisis, this pandemic, it's an opportunity to close in on ourselves, to try and conserve. Whereas the other 2 spies, they said, this is an opportunity not for conservation, but for growth. This is an opportunity to say, what can we learn? The schools of the future. I don't have time, Luis, to talk about it, but I believe 20, 30 years from now, we will not have schools in the way we have them today. Facebook, Amazon are picking up the best students while they're still in high school. Universities will look different, if at all. Coursera has taught us that you can actually, with a MOOC, you can actually learn from the very best teachers in the world in open access ways of learning. I believe that on the one hand, we have to preserve the intimacy that is so great in Israel, the intimacy of the youth movement and of informal education. And we have to find a way to introduce the very best of technology so that children are able to grow in the way they can do it with this instrument. The teacher has to become an enabler, not an imparter. These are very big, big changes that were on their way in any case, and which the pandemic has only accelerated.
Muy bien.
Alan, muchísimas gracias por esta oportunidad de hacernos pensar y reflexionar sobre estos nuevos momentos y desafíos. Les pedimos a todos, por favor, van a recibir por chat en forma inmediata un link para poder hacer una evaluación y ayudarnos a mejorar lo que estamos haciendo. Alan, muchas gracias. Puedes ir a descansar ya, es hora de que duermas. La próxima esperemos que estés de visita, ya sea en México o en Buenos Aires, para poder conversar personalmente. Y los invitamos a todos a la próxima semana con la filósofa Diana Cohen-Agres, donde seguiremos profundizando sobre estos temas. Gracias, Alan, y hasta la semana próxima a todos ustedes. Bye.
Bye.
Adiós, muchas gracias.
Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom.
Laila Tov. תודה.